So, hey, good morning, everybody. We're here at Vision Expo East in New York City. First time together in probably 3 years here in New York City, so it's kind of nice. I'm here with Dr. Stephen Ferrucci. Thank you very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. We're here to talk a little bit more about diabetic retinopathy and the RETeval device. But first, I wanted to ask you, Dr. Ferrucci, tell me a little bit more about kind of your practice, what kind of patients you see.
Yeah, sure. So I'm at a VA hospital, a Sepulveda VA out in Los Angeles. It's one of the 3 VAs in Los Angeles, and it's a medically based practice. You know, it's in a hospital, so obviously it's medically based. And older population generally, so a lot of macular degeneration, cataracts, glaucoma, and also a ton of diabetic retinopathy. A lot of patients with diabetes. Lots sent up from primary care to be screened for retinopathy and, you know, to see if they have retinopathy. So spend a lot of my day dealing with diabetic retinopathy, quite frankly.
And so what are some of the challenges that you faced with treating patients who have diabetic
Yeah,
retinopathy?
you know, I think one of the biggest challenges is access to care or getting them in to see you, right? And we know that we have treatments now that can help preserve vision, but we have to examine those patients and determine the ones that need treatment. So a lot of it's still patient education, you know, explaining to patients with diabetes the importance of getting a yearly dilated retinal exam, even if they think they have great vision. There was a study out not that long ago, and they asked patients who said they did not get their eyes checked, diabetic patients who did not have their eyes checked in a year, why did you not get your eyes checked? And the number one reason was there's no reason to. Because sometimes they think, you know, I see good, my eyes must be healthy. And we know that's not true. And we've all seen meaningful retinopathy in patients with perfect 20/20 vision.
Yeah.
So I think it's patient education, explaining to them the importance of getting their eyes checked, even with good vision, the importance of yearly or sooner if they have retinopathy exams. And then I like to talk to my patients about, you know, what they call the ABCs of diabetes, right? Keeping their A1C under good control, their blood pressure under good control, and the cholesterol under good control. Because studies tell us if they can do that, it helps minimize the chance of getting retinopathy if they don't have retinopathy, or the chance of their retinopathy progressing if they do have retinopathy.
Sure.
So that's an important part of the patient education message as well.
Now, from a diagnostic standpoint, kind of what are some of the challenges you face diagnostically when it comes to diabetic retinopathy?
Yeah, so, you know, obviously it starts with a dilated retinal exam. And to me, that's, you know, even though there's great technology, and we'll talk about that in a second, but it still starts with a dilated retinal exam. You know, you have to dilate the patient. You have to look for any signs of diabetic retinopathy, dot blood hemorrhages, cotton wool spots, neovascularization, the whole 9 yards. So you have to look for that. So I think it always starts and ends with a good dilated retinal exam. And the interesting thing is, back when I was in school, they kind of said, you know, diabetes is a disease of the posterior pole. And you're going to see most of the changes in the posterior pole. But now with wide field imaging and all this, we're realizing that that's not necessarily true. And a lot of the signs of diabetic retinopathy could be outside of the posterior pole in the periphery. And if we don't look in the periphery, they say that we can misclassify as much as 10% or more patients, we can misclassify their level of retinopathy if we don't look in the periphery.
Really?
Yeah, so you have to look in the periphery. So to me, that's first. The other thing I think is a great adjunct to your clinical exam is Fundus Photos. Especially now, there's a bunch of companies that have wide field imaging, whether it's Optos or the Aiden by Eye Care. There's a bunch of companies that have these, Claris as well. But you know, wide field imaging is really, really important. I love to take a good quality wide field photo and look at the photo sometimes even before I see the patient or after, because, you know, sometimes, let's face it, you're looking with your 20 diopter lens and the patient's looking around, they're not 100% cooperative, they get some cataracts, your view's limited. If you get a nice quality image, you can make sure you're not missing anything.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, using that as an adjunct to your clinical exam is huge. And then obviously OCT, right? You know, I used to tell people, before I worked for the VA, I worked for Indian RETeval, the function of the retina, which is extremely, extremely helpful.
That's very interesting. Now, do you use a specific protocol, like
I do.
DR assessment?
Yeah, I use a DR assessment protocol, and I like it because it's really relatively simple, quite frankly, right? It looks at 4 things: the amplitude, the implicit times, the patient's age, and the pupillar response, and it gives you a number.
Sure.
Right? And that number, and the magic number is sort of 23.4. So if that number is 23.4 or higher, studies tell us that those patients are 11 times more likely to need an ocular intervention within the next 3 years.
Sure.
So, you can use that number to help sort of grade their level of retinopathy. And the thing I like about it is it's an objective test, right? So it's not like you don't have to look and say, well, how many hemorrhages are there? It's an objective test.
Yes.
So by using that, you can kind of evaluate their level of severity based on just a number, which is kind of nice. And I don't use it in a vacuum, but I use it with my clinical picture as well. And the two together can really give you a nice idea of what's going on. And then you can use that number over time to follow the patient and make sure that they're not getting worse.
Sure.
And 1 year it's 23.4, the next year it's 24 point something, then 25, then 20, then you know this is a patient heading in the wrong direction. And I might send the patient out sooner for treatment than I might just based on their retina alone. So to me, it's a really nice tool. Again, I think it's really nice to have a structure and function together because that really helps. As a matter of fact, I was reading this one study and they said if they just looked at the photos and they had doctors predict who was going to need treatment and what have you, if they just looked at photos alone, I think their accuracy is like 22% or something. If they just look at the DR alone, it was much better, 35% or something. But if they use both together, they were around 70% predictive for who would need treatment.
Wow.
So again, using the structure and function together, to me, is really a home run.
That's great. Excellent. Well, thank you. One last thing,
yes,
Dr. Ferrucci, is you see a lot of diabetic patients.
Yes.
Is there any kind of like tips that you would give to your colleagues in terms of how you manage your diabetic patients? That kind of one thing you'd say that is critical for
they put me on the
patients.
spot. No, I think that to me really the important thing is just to explain to patients the importance of getting their eyes checked, even if they think they have great vision.
Yes.
And I always tell my patients, the sooner we can detect a problem, the more options we have to fix it. Right. And if you come in when you already have a lot of damage and your vision's already affected, it limits what we can do. So early detection to me is really the key. So anything we can do to get the patients in earlier, to get their retinas evaluated for any meaningful retinopathy, the better off we are.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us today at Vision Expo East. We hope you have a pleasant day and hope to see you soon. Take care.